The night was calm, with a quiet stillness that only settled over the city streets when most people were already home. Streetlights cast long shadows across the asphalt, and the faint hum of distant traffic was the only sound breaking the silence. Officer Reynolds was on her usual night patrol, driving slowly through the quiet neighborhoods, keeping a watchful eye for anything unusual. She had been on the force for over 10 years and had seen all sorts of situations, from small disturbances to serious emergencies, but nights like this often felt peaceful, almost normal. As she cruised down one particular street, her headlights catching the glimmer of wet pavement from a light drizzle earlier, she noticed a car approaching from the opposite direction. It was a dark-colored sedan, moving a little faster than the speed limit. Her eyes narrowed as she made a mental note. Speeding was not uncommon, but she always paid attention, especially on streets where children often played and neighbors walked their dogs. She flipped on her indicator and prepared to follow the car. Deciding she would pull it over if it didn't slow down, the car didn't slow. In fact, it maintained its speed steadily, gliding down the street as if it were in a hurry to get somewhere. Officer Reynolds reached for her radio, tapping lightly as she alerted dispatch that she might be conducting a traffic stop. Unit 12, I'm following a dark sedan heading east on Elm Street. Possible speeding. Preparing to pull over, she spoke calmly, her voice steady. She adjusted her grip on the steering wheel. The sedan soon pulled over, its tires crunching lightly on the gravel shoulder as it came to a halt. Officer Reynolds took a deep breath, reminding herself that most traffic stops were routine. She parked her car a short distance behind, turned on the flashing lights, and stepped out into the cool night air. Her boots clicked against the pavement as she approached the vehicle, her flashlight casting a steady beam over the windshield. The driver rolled down the window. He appeared calm, composed, and polite, which immediately eased some of the tension in Officer Reynolds' chest. He was a man in his early 30s, neatly dressed, with short-cropped hair and a kind, open expression. His hands rested lightly on the steering wheel as he met her gaze, showing no signs of nervousness or agitation. "Good evening, officer," he said politely. "Is there a problem?" Officer Reynolds offered a professional smile, keeping her tone firm but friendly. "Good evening. I noticed you were going a little over the speed limit back there. Can I see your license and registration, please?" The man nodded immediately, reaching into his jacket pocket to retrieve the documents. He handed them to her carefully, making sure they were visible and accessible. Officer Reynolds took them with a nod, shining her flashlight briefly on the papers to inspect them. Everything appeared to be in order. His license was valid, registration current, and insurance information up to date. As she began to return the documents, her eyes caught something unusual. At first, she thought it was just the pattern of light on his arm, but then she saw it more clearly. There was a tattoo, partially visible as he rolled up his sleeve slightly while handing over the papers. It was large, intricate, and familiar, though she couldn't place it immediately. She leaned in a little, curious. Trying not to show too much of her reaction, the tattoo was unusual because it wasn't just decorative, it had meaning. Officer Reynolds had seen it before, not on a person, but in community stories, local news articles, and sometimes in police briefings. She recognized it now, the design distinct enough that there was no mistake. Her heart skipped a beat, and she felt an unexpected pause in her movements. It was strange to feel so surprised by something as simple as a tattoo, yet in that instant, it felt like the world had slowed down. The man noticed her hesitation and tilted his head slightly, a small, polite smile forming on his lips. "Is everything okay, officer?" he asked, his voice calm, friendly, tinged with curiosity. Officer Reynolds blinked, forcing herself to regain composure. Yes. "Everything's fine," she replied, her voice steady, despite the sudden flurry of thoughts in her mind. She took a step back and continued, handing his documents back to him. Her eyes lingered just a moment longer on the tattoo before she glanced away, trying to act normal. For a moment, neither spoke. The night seemed unusually quiet, the hum of distant traffic fading into the background. Officer Reynolds' mind was racing. She knew the reputation associated with the tattoo. The man in front of her wasn't just any civilian pulled over for a speeding ticket. He had a history, a story that was widely respected, though few people in the city had actually met him. He had made a name for himself through his work in the community, helping young people, supporting local projects, and often stepping up in ways that quietly changed lives. She remembered reading about him in a community newsletter not long ago. He had organized a neighborhood program for children who didn't have access to sports facilities, teaching them teamwork, discipline, and leadership. Another story detailed how he had helped mediate conflicts between neighbors, preventing small issues from turning into serious disputes. He was someone who inspired trust and admiration, not suspicion. And now, here he was, calm and courteous in front of her. With that same distinctive tattoo, the realization hit her in a way she hadn't expected. For a brief moment, she felt a twinge of embarrassment. How often had she made snap judgments, even unconsciously, about people she didn't know? This man could have easily been judged based on his appearance alone, but he was the opposite of what stereotypes might suggest. He was respectful, law-abiding, and deeply involved in making the community better. "Thank you, officer," he said softly, breaking her train of thought. He gestured politely to the documents she had returned. "I appreciate it." Officer Reynolds nodded, forcing a professional smile. "You're welcome. Please be careful and watch your speed," she said, her voice regaining its normal cadence. She had to remind herself that she was still on duty, still responsible for enforcing the law. Even if the circumstances felt different now, the man rolled up his window slowly, giving her a nod of appreciation before putting the car in gear. As he drove away, she watched him merge safely into the street, his presence leaving a lingering sense of admiration and reflection. She stood for a moment thinking about the brief encounter, about how a simple tattoo had revealed so much more than appearances could ever show. As Officer Reynolds returned to her patrol car, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. The encounter was routine in the literal sense. Someone had been speeding. She had stopped him, and she had performed her duties, but the human element had completely changed the experience. It reminded her that policing wasn't just about rules and regulations. It was about people, about understanding, and sometimes about humility. She slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and continued down the street. The glow of streetlights reflecting off the hood of her car, her mind lingered on the man she had just met. His calm demeanor, the story behind the tattoo, and the quiet confidence he carried left a strong impression on her. She realized that every stop, every interaction, had the potential to teach her something new, not about the law, but about the people she served. Tonight, what could have been just another routine traffic stop turned into a moment of connection, a reminder of why she had joined the force in the first place. She drove on, alert yet reflective, knowing that the city held countless untold stories, and that sometimes the smallest details, like a tattoo, could open a window into a life full of meaning and impact. For Officer Reynolds, the night continued, quiet and calm as before. But something had shifted. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a gentle reminder that every person behind the wheel, every individual she encountered, had a story worth listening to, a life worth understanding, and a character that might surprise her in the best possible way. And with that thought, she turned onto the next street, ready for whatever the night might bring, carrying with her a lesson in humanity she wouldn't soon forget. After the car had driven away, Officer Reynolds sat in her patrol car for a few moments, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. The quiet hum of the engine and the occasional distant car on the main road were the only sounds around her. She tried to focus on the night's routine patrol, but her mind kept drifting back to the man she had just stopped. There was something about him, the calm way he had handled the situation, a quiet confidence in his eyes, and of course, the tattoo. She had seen plenty of tattoos in her years on the force, but this one was different. It wasn't just ink on skin, it carried meaning, history, respect. She leaned back in her seat, rubbing the back of her neck. She realized she had frozen for a brief moment when she first noticed it, a reaction she hadn't expected. Officer Reynolds prided herself on professionalism, on treating every stop with fairness and care. But something about this encounter had shaken her in a small but undeniable way. She had to remind herself that, even after all her years of service, people still had the power to surprise her, and not always in ways she could predict. As she drove slowly down the next block, her thoughts wandered to what she knew about the man. His name had come up in community meetings, local news stories, and even in casual conversations among neighbors. He had a reputation for being deeply involved in helping others, guiding young people away from trouble, organizing community programs, and quietly stepping in when conflicts arose. He wasn't someone who sought attention for what he did. His work was always behind the scenes. The kind that made real changes, but rarely made headlines. Officer Reynolds felt a small smile form on her lips. It was unusual for her to feel admiration for someone she had just stopped for a traffic violation, but there it was. She reflected on her own assumptions, realizing that a person's appearance or even a single detail like a tattoo could never tell the full story. In this case, that ink had been a key to understanding the man behind the wheel. A hint at the life he had led and the respect he had earned in the community. She made a mental note to follow up later, to learn more about his work in the neighborhood. While she couldn't change the fact that her initial reaction had been one of surprise and perhaps unconscious judgment, she could let it guide her toward a better understanding of the people she served. Her role as an officer wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was also about connecting with people, seeing them as more than just a driver, a suspect, or a statistic. As she continued her patrol, she couldn't help but replay the encounter in her mind. She remembered the way the man had handed her his documents so calmly, the polite tone he had used, and the way his eyes had met hers without a hint of fear or defensiveness. There was an ease about him, quiet assurance that made her reflect on how many people she encountered on patrol were capable of similar grace. If only given the chance, she drove past a row of small houses, each one quiet under the soft glow of the streetlights. The night air carried a faint chill, and she could see her breath briefly as she exhaled. Officer Reynolds appreciated nights like this, when the streets were calm and the world seemed to slow down for a moment. It gave her time to think, to reflect, and sometimes to learn lessons she hadn't expected to counter on a routine patrol. Her thoughts shifted back to the man's tattoo. It wasn't just the design itself, it was what it represented. She had seen him at community events mentioned in local bulletins. Known for his involvement in mentoring programs and charity work, the tattoo was almost a symbol of his commitment, a visible reminder of the life he had built through service, leadership, and dedication. She felt a renewed respect for him, realizing that a single encounter, no matter how brief, could reveal layers of a person she would never have imagined. As she drove on, her mind wandered to the practical side of things. She wondered how many other drivers she had pulled over in the past who had stories like this, people with lives full of meaning, contributions, and lessons she would never know about. It made her reflect on the nature of her job, how it often required quick judgments, and how dangerous it could be to rely on assumptions. Each stop, each interaction was an opportunity to see beyond the surface, to notice the small details that could reveal who someone truly was. Her thoughts were interrupted by the faint sound of her radio. A fellow officer reported a minor disturbance at a nearby convenience store. Officer Reynolds acknowledged the call, her focus returning to the task at hand. But even as she responded, a part of her mind lingered on the man she had just met. She thought about how ordinary moments, like a traffic stop, could unexpectedly become lessons in humanity, humility, and respect. When she reached the location of the reported disturbance, it was quickly resolved with no incident. The situation was minor, a misunderstanding between a customer and the store clerk. But it reminded her how varied her nights could be. One moment, she was reflecting on an inspiring encounter. The next, she was dealing with a simple argument over a product. It was all part of the rhythm of the job, part of the unpredictable flow of life on the streets. After handling the disturbance, Officer Reynolds returned to her patrol route, the city quiet once more. She thought again about the man's calm demeanor and the respect he seemed to command without demanding it. She remembered the polite way he had spoken, the care he had taken in presenting his documents, and the unassuming pride he carried. It struck her how much could be learned from observing, not just actions, but character. She began to consider what she might say if she encountered him again under different circumstances. Perhaps she would have the chance to speak more, to understand his story in greater depth. Even though her duties as a police officer required maintaining authority and professionalism, she felt that genuine human connection could happen even in brief encounters. And in this case, the encounter had already left a lasting impression. As the hours passed and her patrol continued, she reflected on the larger picture of her work. Every call, every stop, every interaction with the community was an opportunity to see beyond the surface. She realized that, as a police officer, she wasn't just enforcing rules, she was witnessing the human side of her city. The lives of ordinary people who often carried extraordinary stories, and sometimes those stories revealed themselves in the smallest details, like a tattoo or a calm smile. Moments that could change the way she saw the world. The thought stayed with her as she drove through the quiet streets, past houses where lights twinkled in windows, and the occasional car passed in the distance. Officer Reynolds felt a sense of gratitude for the experience, a quiet appreciation for the reminder that people were more complex than they seemed. The night patrol, usually routine, had offered her a glimpse into someone else's life, and it was a glimpse that left her thoughtful, reflective, and quietly inspired. Eventually, she returned to her usual patrol route, keeping an eye out for the usual traffic violations, disturbances, and calls. But now, with the memory of that encounter fresh in her mind, she approached her work with a renewed perspective. She reminded herself that behind every car, every interaction, every face, there was a story waiting to be understood, a person worthy of respect, and a lesson waiting to be learned. The night continued, calm and quiet as before, yet somehow different. Officer Reynolds felt a subtle shift within her, an awareness that small moments could carry unexpected weight. She drove on, alert and focused, yet reflective. Understanding that her role was about more than enforcing laws, it was about seeing people, hearing them, and sometimes learning from them. And as the city slept, Officer Reynolds carried with her the image of the man, the tattoo, and the unexpected lesson he had given her. It was a reminder that every stop, every interaction, held the potential for insight, understanding, and even humility. And with that thought, she continued her patrol, ready for whatever the rest of the night might bring, knowing that the most meaningful encounters were often the ones that caught her by surprise. The next day, Officer Reynolds couldn't stop thinking about the man she had pulled over the night before. It wasn't unusual for officers to remember stops, but this one lingered differently. His calm demeanor, the unusual tattoo, and the quiet respect he carried had left a lasting impression. Normally, once a stop was done, it was filed in the reports and put behind her. But this encounter felt heavier, more personal somehow. She couldn't shake the curiosity she felt about who he really was and the life behind that tattoo. It was mid-morning when she returned to her usual patrol area. The streets were busier than last night, filled with the sounds of school children walking to class, neighbors chatting across fences, and the occasional vehicle rushing by. Yet even in the noise, she found herself replaying the moment, recalling the details as if she needed to see it clearly in her mind again. She thought about the way he had held himself, polite and confident, without arrogance or defensiveness. That balance, she realized, was rare. Most people would have been nervous during a traffic stop, some even frightened. But he had been completely composed. Officer Reynolds remembered the way his eyes had met hers, with openness. How he had smiled slightly while handing over his documents. There was a sense of honesty in him, a kind of integrity that was immediately noticeable. It made her wonder about the stories he carried, the experiences that shaped him, and how someone could walk through the world with such quiet authority and kindness all at once. She felt a mix of respect and curiosity, wanting to know more about the man behind the calm exterior. Later that afternoon, as she took a short break at the precinct, she found herself scrolling through reports and community newsletters she had seen before. Her attention naturally went to anything mentioning his name. There were small articles praising his work with local youth programs, mediating neighborhood disputes, and helping organize charity events. He was known, quietly, as someone who stepped up when others didn't, often without seeking recognition. Officer Reynolds read each story slowly, taking in the details, feeling a sense of admiration build within her. It was clear that the tattoo she had seen wasn't just a symbol. It was a marker of the life he had lived and the work he had done to make the community better. By the time her shift ended, she was already planning to patrol through the areas he frequented. Not because she wanted to watch him in any suspicious way, but because she was genuinely curious about his story. She reminded herself it was important to keep her professional boundaries. Yet she couldn't deny that she wanted to understand the human side of someone who had clearly made a positive impact on the world around him. That evening, she spotted him again. He was parked outside a small community center, talking to a group of teenagers. The setting was calm. It's a kind of peaceful environment that contrasted sharply with the high-stress situations she often faced on patrol. From a distance, she watched him engage with the kids, his gestures open and encouraging, his voice gentle but firm. He listened to them patiently, asked questions about their day, and offered advice without lecturing. It was clear that he had earned their trust, and that they respected him deeply. Officer Reynolds pulled her car over a little down the street, watching for a moment before she decided to approach. She knew that initiating contact outside of duty was unusual, but this felt different. It wasn't about enforcement. It was about understanding and connection. She stepped out of her car, letting her uniform remind her to stay professional, but also aware that the conversation could be human. It's not formal. As she walked toward him, he noticed her approach and smiled. It wasn't a nervous or startled smile. It was a welcoming one, acknowledging her presence without hesitation. "Good evening, officer," he said warmly. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." Officer Reynolds returned the smile, feeling a little lighter than she had expected. "Evening," she replied. "I saw you talking with the kids and thought, I'd like to hear more about what you're doing here." He nodded, gesturing for her to come closer. "Of course. We're just wrapping up a session. These kids are amazing, they have a lot of potential, and it's rewarding to see them learning and growing." Shh. She stood there, observing quietly, noticing the ease with which he engaged everyone around him. It wasn't just leadership. It was genuine care. He didn't dominate the conversation, didn't speak over anyone, but guided the discussion in a way that helped each person feel heard. Officer Reynolds felt a pang of admiration. It was one thing to hear about his work in reports. It was another to see it in action. After the group dispersed, he turned his full attention to her. "I'm glad you stopped by," he said. "Not many people take the time to see what's really happening here." Officer Reynolds felt a little nervous, but she kept her composure. "I wanted to understand. Last night, when I noticed your tattoo, it caught me off guard. I realized I didn't really know anything about you beyond what I'd read in reports." She paused, unsure how much to reveal. "I thought maybe I should see for myself." He chuckled softly, a warm, reassuring sound. "I understand. Most people see the tattoo and make assumptions. I've learned not to take it personally. But I'm glad you're here. I can show you a bit of what we do." For the next hour, he walked her through the programs he had established. She listened as he described the work from helping teenagers with school projects to providing mentorship in conflict resolution. He spoke with humility, never boasting, yet his dedication shone through in every word. Officer Reynolds asked questions, genuinely interested, and he answered each one with patience and clarity. As the conversation continued, she realized how much she had underestimated the human element behind the stories she read in newsletters. Seeing it firsthand, observing the direct impact on people's lives, made everything more real. This wasn't about news articles or reputation. It was about everyday actions, small efforts that combined to create meaningful change. The man noticed her attentiveness. "It's rare," he said quietly, "to meet someone who wants to understand rather than judge. Most people see a tattoo or hear a name and make up their minds before they know anything else." Officer Reynolds nodded, reflecting on her own moment of hesitation the night before. "I've been guilty of that," she admitted. "Even after all these years on the force, I realize how easy it is to make assumptions. Last night, I froze when I saw your tattoo. It made me realize how little I actually knew about you and your work." He smiled gently. "It's human to have reactions. What matters is how you follow through after. You're here now, and that shows openness, and that counts for a lot. The two of them continued talking, not as officer and civilian, but as two people trying to understand each other. He shared stories of challenges he had faced, mistakes he had learned from, and the moments that had shaped his philosophy. Officer Reynolds shared some of her experiences as well, the difficult calls, the small victories, and the lessons learned from years of interacting with people from all walks of life. It was a conversation that neither expected to have during a routine week. There were no tickets, no arrests, no warnings, just two people connecting, learning, and reflecting. Officer Reynolds felt a sense of respect deepen within her, not just for him, but for the work he had done and the quiet courage it required to lead by example. As the night drew closer, the temperature dropped slightly, and the streetlights flickered on. They wrapped up the conversation, both aware that they had gained a deeper understanding of each other. He thanked her for taking the time to see beyond the surface, and she thanked him for showing her the real-life impact of his dedication. Officer Reynolds walked back to her patrol car with a new perspective. She realized that policing wasn't just about rules and enforcement. It was about human connection, about seeing the person behind the moment. Last night, she had seen a man she respected from a distance. Tonight, she had experienced firsthand why he earned that respect. As she started her car and continued her patrol, she reflected on the importance of humility, curiosity, and open-mindedness. She thought about the lessons she had learned not from a book, not from a report, but from a real encounter with someone whose life was dedicated to helping others. It was a reminder that sometimes the most valuable insights come not from training, but from paying attention, listening, and being willing to see the truth beyond first impressions. The city streets remained calm, the hum of distant traffic accompanying her thoughts. Officer Reynolds felt a renewed sense of purpose. Understanding that every encounter, no matter how small, had the potential to teach her something meaningful. And as she drove through the quiet neighborhoods, she knew that tonight had been one of those rare nights, one where a simple curiosity had turned into a profound lesson in humanity. She smiled quietly to herself. Thinking about the man and the impact he had on those around him, there was a warmth in her chest, a sense of inspiration that she hadn't felt in a long time. And as she continued on her patrol, she promised herself to carry that lesson forward, to approach every stop, every interaction with more awareness, more empathy, and a willingness to truly see the people behind the stories. The night was far from over, but Officer Reynolds felt that something significant had already happened. She had witnessed a quiet act of leadership, humility, and integrity, and it had changed her perspective. And as she drove on, she realized that this encounter would stay with her for a long time, shaping the way she approached her work, her community, and the people she would meet in the future. The following days were quiet for Officer Reynolds in terms of traffic stops. She had her usual routine of patrolling the streets, responding to calls, and checking in at the precinct. But her mind kept returning to the man she had met. Each time she thought about him, she realized how much she had underestimated what a single person could do for a community. She found herself remembering the way he had spoken to the kids, the calm authority he carried, and the genuine respect he commanded without demanding it. It had left a mark on her, one that she couldn't ignore, even amid the usual chaos of her job. One evening, she was parked near a small park. She noticed a familiar car slowly approaching. Her heart skipped a beat. It was him again, driving calmly, looking out for pedestrians and maintaining a careful speed. He waved as he passed, and she waved back, feeling a small sense of anticipation. She knew this might be another opportunity to connect, to learn more, and perhaps to see firsthand the reasons behind the respect he had earned in the community. Minutes later, she saw him parked outside a local community hall. The windows glowed with warm light, and she could see a few people moving inside. Curiosity pulled her forward, and she parked a short distance away, stepping out to watch. The man was outside the building, speaking with volunteers and organizing supplies for what seemed to be a community dinner and educational session. His movements were calm but purposeful, each action deliberate and considerate of the people around him. He noticed her again and gave a polite nod, signaling that she was welcome to approach. Officer Reynolds walked toward him, feeling a mixture of professionalism and genuine human curiosity. As she neared, he greeted her with a warm smile. "Good evening, officer. It's nice to see you again." "Evening," she replied. "I thought I'd stop by. It looks like you're busy, but I wanted to understand more about what you're doing here." He gestured for her to join him. "I'm happy to show you. We're setting up for a community dinner and tutoring session for kids who need help with schoolwork. Every little bit counts, and it's always better when people work together." As she followed him into the hall, Officer Reynolds noticed the organized chaos inside. Tables were being set up with food, chairs were arranged in neat rows, and a small group of teenagers was gathered around a whiteboard, working on homework assignments. Volunteers moved around efficiently, guided by him, but he never shouted or acted impatient. He spoke softly but confidently, ensuring everyone felt included and valued. He introduced her to a few of the volunteers and children. She immediately noticed how comfortable everyone was around him. He had a way of making people feel respected, seen, and heard. Even the teenagers, who often acted aloof or resistant in such settings, responded positively, listening attentively, and engaging eagerly. Officer Reynolds realized that this man's influence was not based on fear or authority, but on trust and genuine care. Once the introductions were complete, he took her aside and began explaining the work in more detail. "We focus on helping kids who might otherwise fall through the cracks," he said quietly. "Some don't have the support they need at home. Others struggle in school because they lack guidance or encouragement. Our goal is to give them a chance to succeed, to feel valued, and to see that someone believes in them." Officer Reynolds listened closely, absorbing every word. She had seen programs like this in reports, but seeing it in action was different. It wasn't just paperwork or statistics. It was lives being impacted in real time. She felt a sense of admiration growing inside her, mixed with humility. This was someone she had almost judged based on a single visual impression. But he had turned that snap, judgment, into a lesson about character, patience, and quiet dedication. As they walked through the hall, he pointed out various aspects of the program. There were tables set up for tutoring, a small library corner filled with donated books, and a kitchen area where volunteers prepared food. He explained how he had built this initiative from scratch, starting with just a handful of volunteers and a small space, and gradually expanding as more people got involved. He emphasized the importance of community support, teamwork, persistence. Officer Reynolds was impressed by the level of organization and the genuine enthusiasm he inspired in others. She realized that leadership wasn't about commanding attention. It was about creating an environment where people felt empowered to contribute, where their efforts were recognized and valued. She had seen leaders in her work before, but few embodied this balance of humility, respect, and effectiveness. They paused near the kitchen area, where a volunteer was explaining how they managed donations. The man listened carefully, asked questions, and offered suggestions without dominating the conversation. Officer Reynolds noticed how everyone deferred to his guidance, not out of fear, but because they trusted his judgment and respected his experience. It was clear that his influence came from consistency, integrity, and a genuine desire to help others. After a moment, he turned to her and said softly, "I know last night might have seemed surprising. Most people see me one way and make assumptions, but it's important to look deeper. Everyone has a story, and everyone deserves a chance to show who they really are." Officer Reynolds nodded, feeling a wave of understanding wash over her. "I realize that now," she admitted. "I was surprised when I saw your tattoo, but seeing all of this, seeing how you lead and help people, it makes everything clear. I underestimated what one person can do." He smiled gently. "We all make assumptions sometimes. What matters is how we respond after. You came here to see the real work, and that says a lot about your willingness to learn and understand. That's rare." She felt a deep respect for him growing stronger. Here was someone who didn't seek praise, who worked tirelessly to support his community, and who inspired others to do the same. She thought about her own role as an officer and realized that policing wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was about connecting with people, understanding their struggles, and seeing their potential. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, inspired by the way he had built trust and respect through action, not words. As the evening progressed, more people arrived for the community dinner. Families, volunteers, and children gathered around the tables, sharing food, conversation, and laughter. Officer Reynolds observed quietly, noting the positive energy and the sense of belonging that filled the room. She saw firsthand the impact he had on the people around him, the smiles on children's faces, the respectful attentiveness of volunteers, and the genuine appreciation from parents at one point. A teenager approached him nervously, holding a notebook. "Can you help me with this math problem?" she asked softly. He knelt down beside her, patiently guiding her through the steps, explaining without judgment and offering encouragement. Officer Reynolds watched, realizing that the difference between success and frustration for that child could vary. Well be the patience and guidance he provided. It wasn't about doing the work for her. It was about teaching, supporting, and giving her the confidence to succeed. After helping the student, he turned back to Officer Reynolds. "This is what it's all about," he said quietly. "Sometimes people see only the mistakes or the problems, but real change comes from patience, guidance, and showing people that they matter." She nodded, feeling a profound sense of connection to his words. It resonated with her own experiences in law enforcement, how often quick judgments, assumptions, or misunderstandings could escalate situations unnecessarily. Seeing the patience, empathy, and respect he offered reminded her that true influence came from understanding and compassion, not authority or fear. As the night wound down, the volunteers began cleaning up, children were escorted home, and the last of the parents thanked him and departed. He turned to Officer Reynolds with a calm smile. "I hope this gives you a better sense of what I do," he said. "It's not always perfect, and it's not always easy, but it matters. Every little effort counts." Officer Reynolds felt a deep gratitude. "It does," she replied sincerely. "It really does. Seeing all of this, seeing how you work with people, it's changed the way I think about my work and the people I encounter. You've reminded me that every interaction has meaning, and that understanding someone's story can make all the difference." He nodded, the quiet humility in his expression reminding her once again why he commanded respect without demanding it. "That's all any of us can do," he said softly. "Try to understand, try to help where we can, and never underestimate the impact of small acts of care and patience." As Officer Reynolds prepared to leave, she realized that this encounter had done more than teach her about the man in front of her had taught her something about herself. It reminded her why she had joined the force in the first place, why she believed in serving the community, and why empathy and patience were just as important as enforcing the law. Walking back to her patrol car, she felt a sense of reflection and humility. She understood now that the man's tattoo had not been a symbol of something to fear or judge. It had been a marker of a life dedicated to service, compassion, and quiet leadership. She vowed to carry this lesson forward, to approach her work and the people she encountered with greater awareness, empathy, and an understanding that appearances could never reveal the full story. Driving away, the city quiet and calm around her, she knew that tonight had been transformative. It wasn't just a routine evening. It was a reminder that the world was filled with people making a difference in ways that often went unnoticed. And sometimes the smallest details, like a tattoo, a kind gesture, or a patient conversation, could reveal the most extraordinary truths about someone's character. The following week, Officer Reynolds returned to her regular patrols, but something had shifted within her. The encounter with the man and the experiences she had shared over the past days were still vivid in her mind. They had left an impression that was more profound than any routine stop or daily report ever could. She often thought about how easy it was to make quick judgments, how appearances or a single detail could mislead her perception of someone. The tattoo she had noticed on his arm had initially startled her, but it had turned into a doorway to understanding, and the lessons she had learned were invaluable. That evening, she spotted his car again while she was patrolling near a local community park. He was parked outside helping a small group of teenagers practice basketball drills. Their laughter echoed across the quiet street, and she slowed her car slightly, now watching him guide them with patience and encouragement. He was not just instructing them. He was genuinely engaged, noticing their struggles and offering help without ever showing frustration. She marveled at the quiet dedication he carried, how much he gave without expecting anything in return. She decided to pull over and approach him once more. There was a part of her that wanted to interact with him not as a police officer on duty, but as a human being who had been inspired. As she stepped out of her car, he looked up, his face lighting up with a welcoming smile. "Good evening, officer," he said warmly. "I see you're keeping busy." She smiled back, feeling a warmth she hadn't anticipated. "Evening. I wanted to check in and see how everything's going here," she replied. "It's impressive, the work you're doing with these kids." He gestured for her to come closer. "It's going well. Some of them struggle, some of them shine, but that's the beauty of it. Each of them has potential. My job is to help them see it." As she joined the group, she watched quietly, letting the teenagers take center stage while he guided them subtly. They listened, laughed, and tried again when they missed a shot, encouraged by his steady presence. Officer Reynolds realized that this was exactly the reason people respected him, not because of authority, but because he cared and he proved it through action. When the practice ended, the teenagers thanked him and left, waving as they went home. He turned to Officer Reynolds. "I appreciate you stopping by," he said softly. "It's not often people take the time to see what we do here." She nodded, feeling a mixture of respect and admiration. "I wanted to understand, and I do now. What you do matters more than I realized. It's not just the programs or the guidance, it's how you make people feel valued and respected." He smiled, humbled but firm. "That's the goal. To show them they're important, that someone believes in them. That's what drives me." There was a quiet pause between them. Officer Reynolds reflected on her own experiences as a police officer, the rush, the stress, the constant pressure to enforce the law while maintaining fairness. She realized that what she had learned from him applied directly to her work. Patience, empathy, and understanding were just as important as rules and regulations. She felt inspired to approach her duties with a renewed perspective, to look for the humanity in every encounter. After a moment, she spoke again. "I wanted to ask, you've done so much for this community, quietly and without recognition. Has it ever been hard, knowing that not everyone sees or appreciates your efforts?" He considered her question for a moment, his gaze steady. "It can be challenging. People often make assumptions, judge before they understand. But the work itself, the difference it makes, the lives it touches, that's enough. Recognition is secondary. The real reward is seeing someone grow, seeing them succeed because someone cared enough to guide them." Officer Reynolds felt a surge of admiration. Here was someone who lived by principles, not by applause. He didn't need to prove himself or seek validation. His actions spoke louder than any words ever could. She reflected on her own career and realized that she had sometimes been caught up in metrics, reports, and quick judgments. Observing him had reminded her of the deeper purpose behind serving the community, the human side of law enforcement that often went unnoticed. He noticed the thoughtfulness in her expression and nodded slightly. "You know, officer, everyone has moments where they're judged unfairly or misunderstood. I've been through it. But those moments teach you patience, empathy, and the importance of staying true to your values. They teach you to see the person behind the perception." She smiled, acknowledging the wisdom in his words. "I've learned that lesson in the past few days. What started as a simple traffic stop has turned into something much more meaningful for me. I understand now that people are more than appearances, more than mistakes or assumptions. Everyone has a story worth hearing." He extended a hand, not formally, but as a gesture of shared respect. "I'm glad we've had the chance to meet properly," he said. "It's rare that people take the time to truly connect." Officer Reynolds shook his hand, feeling the sincerity behind it. "Me too," she replied. "And I'll carry this lesson forward. It's reminded me why I joined this profession, to serve, to understand, and to make a difference in people's lives whenever I can." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city around them. The streetlights glowed softly, casting long shadows on the pavement. The sounds of distant traffic and occasional laughter from nearby houses created a peaceful atmosphere. It was a quiet, reflective moment, one that highlighted the value of human connection and understanding. Finally, she spoke again. "I know my job is to enforce the law, but I also know it's about connecting with people. understanding them, and sometimes learning from them. You've shown me that firsthand. Thank you, he smiled warmly. And thank you for being open to see beyond the surface. That's the first step to understanding, and it's something many people never take the time to do. It makes all the difference. As the night continued, Officer Reynolds realized it was time to return to her patrol duties. She stepped back toward her car, feeling a sense of reflection and fulfillment. This encounter had been different from any other in her career. It wasn't about issuing a ticket or enforcing a rule. It was about learning, connecting, seeing the depth of a person's character beyond what was immediately visible. Before she got into her car, she looked back at him one last time. He was now helping a volunteer pack up supplies, his attention still focused on supporting others. The quiet determination and humility he carried left a lasting impression on her. She understood now that respect and influence weren't earned through fear or authority. They were earned through integrity, patience, and consistent action. Sliding into her patrol car, she felt a sense of gratitude for the lesson she had learned. The city streets stretched out before her, quiet and calm. But she knew that the impact of this encounter would follow her far beyond this night. She had been reminded that every interaction, no matter how brief, carried the potential for insight, understanding, and even personal growth. As she drove through the neighborhood, she thought about the future, about the people she would meet, and about the importance of empathy in her work. She realized that policing wasn't just about law enforcement, it was about humanity, about seeing the person behind every situation, and about taking the time to understand the stories that often went untold. The man's influence had changed something in her perspective. She felt more patient, more thoughtful, and more aware of the potential in every interaction. She knew she would carry this lesson into her work, approaching each stop, each call, each encounter with a renewed sense of purpose. She would remember to look beyond appearances, to listen, and to see the humanity in every person she met. As Officer Reynolds continued her patrol that night, she reflected on the journey from the initial traffic stop to this moment of understanding. What had started as a routine duty had transformed into a profound lesson in humility, empathy, and respect. She realized that life was filled with unexpected encounters that had the power to teach, inspire, and change perspectives. This one had done all of that and more. Finally, she returned to her station for the night, logging her patrol details and reflecting on the events of the past days. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of growth and understanding that went beyond any report or procedure. She had learned that people were complex, that their lives carried stories worth hearing, and that even the smallest gestures, like taking the time to understand, could have a profound impact before leaving for the night. Officer Reynolds paused for a moment outside the station. The city was still calm under the soft glow of streetlights, and the cool night air carried a sense of quiet peace. She thought about the man, about the teenagers he helped, and about the lessons she had learned. She felt inspired to continue her work with empathy, patience, and a renewed sense of purpose. And as she finally headed home, she knew that this encounter would remain with her forever. It had been a simple traffic stop at first, but it had turned into something much greater, a story of human connection, understanding, and the lasting impact one person could have on a community. She had learned that assumptions could be misleading, that appearances rarely told the full story, and that taking the time to understand someone's life could transform both the observer and the observed. That night, as she drove home, Officer Reynolds carried with her not just the memory of a calm, kind, and inspiring man, but a lasting reminder that every person had value. Every story mattered, and every encounter was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to connect. And she knew that in her work and in life, these lessons were among the most important she could ever carry.